FBI, open the door. Federal agents, we have a warrant.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them.
Tireless advocates for guys on the battlefield who have been a part of unfortunate incidents. There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield. And I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
January 18th, 2025. Fort Bliss Army Base, El Paso, Texas. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera drove a military Humvee through the base's main gate at 11:47 p.m. Military vehicles entering and exiting Fort Bliss were rarely searched. Base access meant trust. The uniform meant honor. But hidden in compartments welded beneath that Humvee's chassis, 180 kilograms of pure cocaine worth $6.3 million on the street. Rivera wasn't conducting military business. He was making a drug run for the Sinaloa Cartel, using his uniform, his base access, and his military vehicle to smuggle narcotics across the border without fear of civilian law enforcement inspection. Rivera wasn't alone. Over 5 years, 34 soldiers and 3 officers at Fort Bliss had been recruited by the cartel to use America's largest army installation as a drug smuggling corridor. They used military vehicles that bypassed Border Patrol checkpoints. They exploited base access that civilian authorities couldn't search. And they dishonored the uniform they wore by serving the very enemies American forces were sworn to fight. The operation moved $890 million worth of drugs through Fort Bliss over 5 years. The cartel paid soldiers between $50,000 and $150,000 per smuggling run, more money than most made in a year of military service. Officers coordinating operations earned up to $300,000 monthly, and together, they turned one of America's most important military installations into a cartel superhighway, protected by the flag they'd pledged to defend. Want to see how the FBI and Army Criminal Investigation Division brought down the most disgraceful military corruption case in modern history? Smash that like button and subscribe to Truth America right now, because what these soldiers did to their oath, their brothers in arms, and their country will infuriate you. This is betrayal at the deepest level. Fort Bliss is one of the largest U.S. Army installations in the country, spanning over 1.12 million acres across Texas and New Mexico. Located directly on the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, the base is home to approximately 35,000 active duty soldiers, 35,000 making it a critical training and deployment center for American military forces. The base's proximity to the border made it strategically valuable, not just for military readiness, but for cartels seeking routes into the United States. Fort Bliss soldiers regularly crossed the border for joint training exercises with Mexican military forces. Military vehicles moved between the base and border checkpoints frequently, and most importantly, military personnel in uniform driving military vehicles were rarely stopped or searched by civilian authorities. In 2020, Sinaloa Cartel recruiters identified this opportunity. They began approaching Fort Bliss soldiers off base, targeting those with financial problems, disciplinary issues, or simply greed. The pitch was simple. Use your military vehicle to transport packages from the border to safe houses in El Paso. You won't be stopped because you're in uniform. You won't be searched because it's a military vehicle. And you'll make $50,000 per trip. Cash, immediate, no questions asked. But soldiers alone couldn't sustain the operation. The cartel needed officers who could authorize vehicle usage, approve leave requests, and prevent scrutiny from command. They recruited 3 officers, Captain James Morrison, First Lieutenant Sarah Kim, and Captain Robert Hayes. These officers earned between $200,000 and $300,000 monthly to coordinate smuggling operations, ensure vehicles were available, and protect corrupt soldiers from investigation. Over 5 years, this network made approximately 340 smuggling runs, moving an estimated 62 tons of cocaine, 18 tons of methamphetamine, and 2.4 tons of fentanyl through Fort Bliss. The investigation that would destroy this network began in August 2024 when DEA agents in Albuquerque arrested a mid-level cartel distributor. During interrogation, he mentioned something that made investigators' blood run cold: drugs arriving in military vehicles driven by soldiers in uniform. DEA contacted Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID, the Army's primary criminal investigative organization. CID agents were skeptical. The idea that active duty soldiers would smuggle drugs seemed unlikely. But DEA provided intercepted communications referencing the base and the soldiers. CID opened a classified investigation. CID agents began surveillance of Fort Bliss soldiers suspected of off-base contact with cartel members. They identified Sergeant Chen meeting with known cartel operatives at restaurants in El Paso. Financial analysis showed Chen had deposited $2.8 million in cash over 4 years. By December 2024, FBI and CID had identified all 37 corrupt personnel, 34 enlisted soldiers, 3 officers. They had financial records proving $18.6 million in unexplained income collectively. January 25, 2025, 4 a.m. FBI tactical teams and Army CID agents coordinated the largest military corruption arrest operation in modern history. Fort Bliss Command had been briefed 12 hours earlier under strict operational security. The base was quietly placed on lockdown at 3:30 a.m., all exits secured, and soldiers confined to quarters under the guise of a surprise readiness inspection. At precisely 4:03 a.m., FBI and CID moved simultaneously. Officers were arrested at their base housing. Enlisted soldiers were arrested in their barracks. Some were pulled from their beds. Others were taken into custody as they prepared for morning PT. Within 90 minutes, all 37 corrupt personnel were in federal custody. Sergeant Chen was arrested in his barracks room at 4:07 a.m. Agents found $340,000 in cash hidden in his closet, along with encrypted phones containing messages with cartel coordinators. Captain Morrison was arrested at his off-base home at 4:15 a.m. His wife and 2 children were present. She had no idea her husband was working for cartels. Drop a comment below. What should happen to soldiers who betray their oath and smuggle cartel drugs? Should they face military court-martial or federal prison? And if you're not subscribed to Truth America yet, do it now. We expose the corruption that destroys our institutions from within. Hit that subscribe button. Fort Bliss Command held an emergency formation at 8 a.m. The base commander addressed 35,000 soldiers, informing them that 37 of their fellow soldiers had been arrested for drug smuggling. The announcement was met with shock, disbelief, and anger. Soldiers who'd served honorably felt betrayed by those who dishonored the uniform. January 26, 2025. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth held a press conference at the Pentagon alongside Attorney General Pamela Bondi, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division Commander Major General Donna Martin. Yesterday, federal law enforcement and Army CID arrested 34 soldiers and 3 officers at Fort Bliss for smuggling drugs on behalf of the Sinaloa Cartel. For 5 years, these individuals betrayed their oath, dishonored their uniform, and used America's military resources to serve the very enemies our forces fight against. This is not just criminal, it is treasonous in spirit. These individuals will face both military court-martial and federal prosecution for their crimes. The legal proceedings were complex. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, active duty personnel can be court-martialed for crimes committed while in service. But drug trafficking is also a federal crime prosecutable in civilian courts. The decision was made to pursue both. Military courts would handle violations of military law and dishonor, while federal courts would prosecute drug trafficking charges. All 37 faced military court-martial proceedings. The charges included conduct unbecoming an officer, disobeying lawful orders, and bringing discredit upon the armed forces. Military prosecutors sought dishonorable discharges and maximum military prison sentences. Simultaneously, all 37 faced federal charges: conspiracy to distribute narcotics, drug trafficking, money laundering, and corruption. Federal prosecutors sought sentences of 25 years to life depending on individual involvement. Faced with dual prosecution and overwhelming evidence, 31 defendants accepted plea agreements. They agreed to plead guilty in both military and federal proceedings in exchange for reduced sentences. The deals resulted in dishonorable discharges, forfeiture of all military benefits, including pensions, and federal prison sentences ranging from 18 to 35 years. 6 defendants, including Captain Morrison and Sergeant Chen, refused any plea and went to trial. The military court-martial proceedings were swift. Evidence of their crimes was presented to military juries who convicted all 6, sentencing them to dishonorable discharges and maximum military prison terms. Federal trials followed in U.S. District Court. Prosecutors presented financial records showing millions in unexplained income, GPS data tracking hundreds of smuggling trips, wiretaps documenting coordination with cartels, and testimony from cooperating defendants. All 6 were convicted on all federal counts. Captain Morrison received the harshest sentence: 45 years in federal prison plus his military sentence. He'd been the highest-ranking officer, earned over $10 million, and coordinated the entire operation. The judge's words were scathing. "You wore the uniform of a United States Army officer. You commanded soldiers who trusted you, and you betrayed them, betrayed your oath, and betrayed your country for money. You are a disgrace to the uniform and to every soldier who serves honorably." Sergeant Chen received 38 years federal plus his military sentence. The original recruiter who'd corrupted 11 others, he'd personally made over $2.8 million. His family, wife, and 3 children lost everything. His military pension was forfeited. His home was seized. And he'll be 71 years old when released from prison. For Fort Bliss, the scandal was devastating. The base implemented comprehensive anti-corruption measures, enhanced financial monitoring for all personnel, random vehicle inspections even for military vehicles, mandatory ethics training, and coordination with civilian law enforcement on all border-related activities. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it would take years. The Army conducted a force-wide review examining financial activities of all personnel stationed near borders. 3 additional soldiers at Fort Hood and 2 at Fort Cavazos were identified with suspicious income and investigated. 2 were eventually charged with unrelated corruption. President Trump addressed the Fort Bliss arrests during a speech to military families. Soldiers who wear the uniform of the United States military are held to the highest standard. The soldiers arrested at Fort Bliss failed that standard catastrophically. They smuggled drugs for cartels. They dishonored every soldier who serves with integrity, but they were caught, prosecuted, and will spend decades in prison. We will not tolerate corruption in our military. We will not allow cartels to infiltrate our armed forces, and anyone who betrays their oath will face the full consequences of their betrayal. By November 2025, the impact is clear. Military smuggling through border bases has effectively stopped as soldiers realize the surveillance and consequences. Fort Bliss has regained operational integrity through enhanced protocols. And the 37 corrupt personnel serve as a warning. No institution is immune to cartel infiltration, but America's military will purge corruption ruthlessly when discovered. The 3 officers who dishonored their commissions will never again wear the uniform they betrayed. The 34 enlisted soldiers who chose money over honor will grow old in federal prison. And the thousands of Fort Bliss soldiers who serve honorably continue their mission, their integrity uncompromised, their oath unbroken. If you believe Truth America is doing the work mainstream media won't do, exposing corruption at every level and demanding accountability, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an investigation. Share this with every patriot you know, because Americans deserve to know when institutions are infiltrated and how justice responds. This is Truth America, bringing you the stories that matter, the truth that's hidden, and the justice that must prevail. We'll see you in the next one.